When we're growing up, we hear that good always wins in the end. The villain gets ahead for a little while, but eventually the truth comes out, justice arrives, and the good guy gets some big moment confirming that choosing the harder path was worth it in the end. And then you become an adult and it becomes pretty obvious that evil does win. At least according to most of the things that we've been taught to call winning, evil does win. Manipulative people get promoted, selfish people get what they want, people lie, they use others, and a lot of times they never have to face the consequences for it. Meanwhile, the good guy, the person who try to live by integrity, a lot of times they're the only ones dealing with the consequences. Recently, that question of what's the point of choosing good in a world where it's very clear that evil does win became pretty personal for me, during a pretty hard season in my life, and I started wondering why loyalty mattered if all I got in return was betrayal. Why integrity mattered when it led to a result that was honestly just as bad if I would have been a terrible person. And it left me wondering whether goodness was actually worth choosing when it really didn't guarantee anything in return. And it seemed like people that chose more evil, selfish paths end up getting their dreams. Then, as everyone does whenever they have an existential crisis, I rewatched Avatar: The Last Airbender. I've always been super drawn to stories about characters that are at a crossroads of choosing between who they're going to be, between good and evil, like Zuko, like Anakin Skywalker, and what drives their decision in their psyche, the psychology, but also the emotions behind it. But this time, rewatching the show, I've watched it many times, it really felt like my first time watching. Has that happened to you? It was like watching a totally different show, not because the show itself had changed, of course, but because I had changed. Here is what I think Avatar is really teaching us about what goodness is and whether it's worth choosing in the end. First, goodness is a choice. Zuko and Azula are siblings, raised in the same place. They had the same abusive father, same culture of fear, conquest, and honestly, pretty impossible expectations. Both of them grew up learning that love is conditional. Compassion is viewed as weakness and gets punished, whereas being a ruthless killer keeps you safe. And honestly, it'll get you a promotion and keep you in your father's good graces. Their childhood explains a lot about who they become. Azula responds by turning herself into exactly what Ozai rewards. She becomes precise, extremely calculating, an absolute force, and constantly aware of where everyone else around her is vulnerable. Control is how Azula protects herself from ever feeling powerless and always in control of the situation. And Zuko responds badly too. He terrorizes people, he hunts Aang across the whole world, he lashes out at his uncle Iroh, and causes real damage because he's convinced that capturing the Avatar will fix whatever his father broke inside of him. And the difference between them is not that Zuko had pain and Azula did not. It's not that one of them was secretly born good while the other was marked evil from birth, but Zuko eventually becomes willing to question the person his pain has turned him into. You see it whenever he finds Appa imprisoned beneath Lake Laogai. Appa's terrified, he's chained, he's gone through this horrible trauma. But Zuko does not first see a living creature who's suffering, he sees an opportunity. Capturing Appa could lead him back to Aang, back to the Fire Nation, going home, finally getting his father's approval. But then Uncle Iroh confronts him and he asks, "Who are you and what do you want?" And Zuko can't answer that, of course, in the moment, because at this point he's barely had a want that did not begin with Ozai. His entire identity was built around earning his way back into a home where his father burned and banished him. He does choose to release Appa, then instead of immediately feeling peaceful and enlightened, he actually got very violently sick. And Iroh explains that Zuko's going through this metamorphosis, that the person he's been up until this point is fighting against the person he's becoming. And his entire body is basically like rejecting that update. And I love that the show lets goodness feel disorienting when you haven't chosen it before. Like, it's not some easy choice. It doesn't come with sacrifice and sometimes pain, and it's some serious rewiring and deconstructing. Up until this point, Zuko has relied on anger and obsession for so long that letting go of them does not initially feel like freedom to him. It feels like he's disappearing. And even after making the right choice, he goes kind of backwards. He betrays Iroh, he returns home, he chooses his father again, then he has to choose differently again. His redemption is not one heroic moment. It is long, it's honestly embarrassing. It's a painful collection of decisions where he slowly stops letting Ozai, shame, and anger choose for him. And I feel like the same is pretty true for us in the real world. Like, most evil is not born through one dramatic announcement that someone has officially joined the dark side or light side. It grows through smaller choices that become easier every time that we repeat them. A lie that protects our image, a cruel comment towards someone that we can tell ourselves they deserve it, pain that we pass forward to the next generation, using our childhood trauma to justify our bad behavior without ever taking responsibility or accountability. Eventually, all of those choices accumulate and they become a personality. Zuko and Azula both inherit pain, but what separates them is what they continue choosing to do with it. There's so many stories right now about showing the backstory of villains and where they came from, almost like showing that they're justified in their actions. But I think one thing the show does so great of showing is that our childhood traumas does not give us an excuse, or it does not absolve us of the choice of who we choose to become in the end. And another thing that it shows us is that goodness is presence. Zuko spends most of the show somewhere other than where he actually is. Even when he's sitting beside his Uncle Iroh, his mind is always fixated on the Avatar and getting his honor back. When they find safety, he's thinking about the Fire Nation. And every peaceful moment feels like an interruption because he believes his real life will begin once he restores his honor. So having tea is wasting time, rest is falling behind, like joy can wait until the mission is over. Whereas Iroh is living through the exact same exile, but he still manages to notice his own life. He can appreciate the flowers, he plays Pai Sho, he talks to strangers, constantly cracking jokes when Zuko seems like he's like a minute away from throwing him into the freaking ocean. Uncle Iroh is not carefree because nothing terrible has happened to him. Quite the contrary. He lost his only son during the siege of Ba Sing Se, and that loss ended his military campaign, changed his relationship to the Fire Nation, and left him carrying a grief that he never fully explains. In the Tales of Ba Sing Se, we have an episode where we watch him. He sits beneath a tree, creates a memorial for his son, and completely breaks down while singing the song he once used to comfort his only son. And I think that scene changes the meaning of every lighter moment that we see from Iroh. His joy is not ignorance. He knows exactly how painful life can be. He simply refuses to let pain take every remaining part of it. Zuko keeps waiting for some future achievement to give him permission to live, whereas Uncle Iroh grieves what he lost while still receiving what is right in front of him. Goodness is service. In the episode where Iroh meets Toph, she's run away after fighting with her friends with Team Avatar. Iroh knows literally nothing about her, never seen her before, doesn't know who she is, doesn't know that she's connected to Aang or that she's the greatest Earthbender alive. No, she can't help him get home to restore Zuko or improve his circumstances in any obvious way. He just notices that she's upset and he offers her tea. He listens to her and gently reminds her that being strong does not mean refusing every form of help. He never really sees Toph again or asks her to repay the tea debt. He just meets someone who's hurting and leaves her better than he found her. We see him do this constantly all throughout the show. In Ba Sing Se, Iroh helps a man who attempts to rob him, and instead of humiliating him, I mean, to us it was hilarious, but he actually corrects his stance, listens to him, sits down, has a cup of tea, talks about his life, and encourages him to pursue a career where his physical strength might actually help people. That man had literally pulled a weapon on him, and Iroh somehow turned that into a come to Jesus meeting about what are you doing with your life, son? And mind you, that was the same day that he was grieving his son, and he spent the whole episode loving on other people, whether singing to the little boy who was crying or serving that guy who was trying to mug him and sitting with him. Every person becomes an opportunity to serve, to encourage or protect, and of course, share a cup of tea with. Whereas Azula will walk into a room and immediately seek for leverage over a person. Uncle Iroh just sees the person. Goodness is strength. Iroh's kindness would mean a lot less if he were only gentle because he lacked the power to be dangerous. But if you've seen the show, you know that damn well is not the case. He may be one of the strongest people in the entire story. He simply does not let that strength to make himself feel larger or to dominate other people. Whenever General Zhao captures the moon spirit, Iroh begs him to stop. He explains that the moon maintains the balance of the whole world, including the Fire Nation, that Zhao supposedly cares about. But Zhao kills it anyways because he wants to be remembered in history as a person who killed the moon. And as soon as he does that, Iroh flips a switch. But he did warn him. He warned him to fafo, okay? And he found out. And the same man who spends half the show asking people to sit down and relax is ready to murk anyone who threatens the spirit or crosses him. So his goodness does not make him passive. It actually gives his power a purpose. His power doesn't have dominion over him or drive his decision making. Zhao wants strength because he wants his name to matter, but Iroh uses strength to defend something vulnerable. And Zuko has to learn that same lesson through firebending. His fire has always come from rage, humiliation, that desperate need to prove himself. But once he leaves the Fire Nation and releases some of that anger, he can barely create a flame, and he's pretty broken. He's like, oh my gosh, so becoming a better person is making me weaker and I can't firebend anymore. They travel to the Sun Warriors and encounter the last surviving dragons, and he actually discovers that fire itself was never only rage and destruction. He learns that fire is warmth, it was light, energy, and life. So the element never changed, but Zuko's understanding of it did. He does not need to give up his fire to become good. He needs a new reason to carry it. And maybe that's a better way to understand goodness than simply thinking of it as being nice. Goodness does not require us to shrink, to become harmless, or pretend that anger never has a place, but rather it asks what our strength is protecting. Goodness is integrity. Aang faces that question at the end of the series. Everyone tells him that killing Ozai is the only realistic way to end the war. And for viewers, we're pretty much agreeing at this point. We want to see him go ham on Fire Lord Ozai. And the reasoning makes sense, right? Ozai's preparing to burn through the Earth Kingdom, and leaving Ozai alive would put millions of people at risk. But Aang was raised by air nomads to value all life. They lead with more defensive forms of combat, evading and protecting human life. So killing Ozai would violate one of Aang's deepest beliefs that actually form who he is. And this is not some fun little moral dilemma for him. He's actually very deeply troubled by this. He's terrified that staying true to himself may come at the expense of innocent people. And every previous avatar even consults, basically being like, yeah, you're gonna have to delete him, bro, like, come on. And then we see a giant lion turtle appears at exactly the right time with a third option. And because of that, Aang is able to take Ozai's bending instead of his life. And I know that's kind of a controversial thing that happened in the show. Energy bending probably seems so convenient. The writers more or less dropped the solution from the sky right before the finale, but emotionally, Aang's choice fits the entire story. He refuses to let Ozai decide who he's going to become in order to defeat him. What goodness does is, even if everyone is saying you only have a choice A or B, goodness always finds a choice C that does not require me to abandon myself and my ideals to get a result. It will always find a way, even if everyone says there isn't one. Ozai believes that power gives him the right to impose his will on everyone else. And if Aang's only answer is to abandon his own values and become more ruthless, then Ozai has still controlled the terms of the fight. But Aang stops him without surrendering the part of himself that he really wants to protect. And that stayed with me because pressure has a way of making compromise sound mature. We tell ourselves the situation is exceptional, so our values, they can't apply in this situation, that the ends justify the means. Life can be incredibly complicated, but Aang forces us to ask whether the quickest solution is changing the situation or quietly changing us. Goodness is sacrifice. Zuko's final Agni Kai with Azula shows what his choices have made him into. Azula is completely unraveling. Mai and Ty Lee have left her. She's banished everyone from the palace and become consumed by fear that every person around her will eventually betray her. Homegirl has lost it, herself and everything. Meanwhile, Zuko at this point, he's calmer than we've ever seen him. The fire no longer comes from panic or the need to prove himself. And for the first time, he actually appears capable of beating Azula. And we see Azula realize that, oh shoot, I might actually lose. So she attacks Katara. Mind you, Katara is not a part of this duel, but Azula targets her anyways because the rules stop mattering the second that they no longer guarantee the outcome that she wants. Zuko sees lightning and throws himself in front of it to save Katara's life. And for almost the entire show, he's been willing to sacrifice people for his chance at the throne. And now with that throne finally within reach, he's willing to lose it and possibly die to save someone else. That moment says more about his transformation than the coronation ever could. Azula sacrifices a person to protect the victory, but Zuko is sacrificing the victory to protect the person. Goodness is unconditional. This honestly may be the part of Avatar that challenged me the most. You know, I used to think that goodness meant making the right choices because eventually those choices would create a good life. Be loyal, you'll receive loyalty, you'll reap what you sow. Good karma returns, whatever philosophy tickles your fancy. We've heard it all. Live with integrity and eventually life will reward you with the future that you earned. And those are beautiful hopes, and I still hope for many of them, of course, but what I learned is that that is not goodness. Those are actually transactions. The moment that goodness requires a specific return, it becomes a deal. Maybe a very wholesome deal with excellent intentions, but it's still a negotiation. C.S. Lewis wrote, "You can be good for the mere sake of goodness. You cannot be bad for the mere sake of badness." Evil is always trying to gain something, whether power, pleasure, control, revenge, you name it. But pure goodness cannot depend on what it gets back. Otherwise, the second the reward disappears, so does the goodness. The clearest example comes when Zuko finally returns to Iroh. Zuko knows he betrayed his uncle. Iroh protected him, followed him into exile, loved him like a son, and repeatedly tried to guide him toward a better life. But Zuko abandoned him, betrayed him in the moment that mattered most. And when he finds Iroh again, he's terrified that he's destroyed their relationship. He's prepared to beg for forgiveness, to accept whatever anger Iroh has been holding because he feels it is justified. But before Zuko can even finish, Iroh pulls him into his arms, sobbing and just rejoicing, almost like a prodigal son moment. And he says, "I was never angry with you. I was sad because I was afraid you'd lost your way." Even talking about the scene, it just breaks me because Zuko expects love to behave like a transaction. He failed, so love should be withdrawn, or he betrayed Iroh, so he should have to earn his way back. That's how Ozai's love worked. Approval was payment for obedience, but goodness is different. That doesn't mean that Zuko's choices did not matter. Iroh was very hurt. Their relationship needed truth, repentance, change, yes. But Iroh was never loving Zuko because Zuko performed well enough to keep receiving it. His goodness did not depend on Zuko becoming the person Iroh hoped he would become. It was freely given. And I think that is why being around truly good people can feel so emotional, because you're not constantly auditioning for your place in their life. You don't leave every interaction wondering whether you were useful enough or impressive enough, agreeable enough, or easy enough for them to keep. Goodness is freedom. This circles back to the question that started this whole video. Why be good in a world when evil frequently wins? General Zhao, we see him rise to the military because he will destroy anything standing between him and glory. Azula conquers Ba Sing Se. She understands exactly how to manipulate people and institutions. We see Ozai just about accomplishes his goal, conquering the world. No line that he doesn't refuse to cross. What they do works. And in real life, people who lie, who exploit, who discard others, they absolutely do end up maybe with the promotion, with the influence, with the control, running the government, you know, like very visible successes than people who refuse to live that way. And I feel like we're always so stumped by like, why does evil win? Of course evil wins. Evil is trying to win. But goodness was never trying to win. And I think that was one part that I had misunderstood. And it sounds so simple, but it gave me peace once I understood that goodness and evil are not competing for the same prize, just with different strategies. Goodness is not evil with just better manners, slowly hoping to collect the same money, the same power, the same end goal without getting your hands dirty. Their goals within the human experience are completely fundamentally different at every single level. Zhao wants people to remember his name. Iroh wants the person sitting across from him to feel seen and valued. Azula wants everyone close to her to fear her. But Iroh wants Zuko to become free, even when that freedom means that Zuko will make choices that Iroh can't control. Ozai wants the whole world to kneel to his power. Aang wants to save it without losing his own soul. So when people say that the good guy always loses, or nice guys always finish last, maybe they're right. According to a standard goodness was never using. You can't beat someone in a race that they never entered. Iroh is not trying to acquire more than Ozai. His life is not aimed at the throne. He does not walk into every room looking for proof that he matters. He already knows who he is, which gives him the freedom to pour himself into other people instead of taking from them. And that kind of life is honestly almost impossible to measure. There's no public scoreboard for how many people became kinder because someone treated them with patience. We can't easily count the families that became healthier because one person decided not to pass down generational trauma. No one hands out trophies for strangers who kept going because one person made them feel seen at the exact moment that they were ready to give up. But we feel the difference. Azula enters people's lives and leaves fear behind, whereas Iroh enters them and leaves something that they can live from. So I do not think good people always change the entire world. Most of us will never have that kind of reach. But good people, true goodness changes every world that they enter. And maybe that's more powerful than we realize. And maybe it's something that we'll never see on this side of eternity. And when I look at all these characters and what they represent, I know which life I would rather have. And I don't know, maybe that's how Avatar, it's my take on how it defines goodness. Not as a guarantee that life will reward us for behaving correctly, and not as a nicer route towards the same thing everyone else is chasing. But true goodness is choosing who you want to be without demanding that life pay you back for it. And I think that's the part that I never fully understood. Being good and, you know, being a goody two-shoes is not new to me. But to be honest, for most of my life, there was still like a transaction buried somewhere underneath it. I'll be faithful, but also I know that life will return it to me. I'll make the right choices, and one day I will receive the right outcome. I will love people well, and surely that love will return to me in a form that I can recognize. So when life did not hold up to its end of that deal that I unconsciously had, I felt like I couldn't have peace until evil lost, until that huge injustice made sense, or until something happened that proved that all the good I had done had not been wasted. But waiting for that resolution still kept me bound to it. My peace was dependent on an outcome that I could not control. And I'm finally at a place where I don't need that outcome anymore. That doesn't mean that what happened suddenly feels fair. It doesn't mean that I have an answer for why bad things happen to good people who generally are doing good. I just no longer need every question resolved before I allow myself to live. And for the first time, I think, in my life, I'm choosing goodness simply because it is who I want to be. And honestly, in this last year of living that way and shifting and having peace within that decision, I have experienced more joy than I ever have in my entire life. Once I stopped looking at every part of my life through what was missing or what milestone I needed to hit by a certain age and by these things to be check, 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 like to fulfill these other definitions that others put onto me of what it meant to be healed, whole, happy, all those things. Once I quit looking at my life through that lens, I could finally see how much was already there. A good conversation, a quiet morning, a walk through New York, a good meal, meeting a new friend. Ordinary everyday moments stopped feeling like filler between things that I was waiting for. And what I realized is that gratitude had so much room to grow. Suddenly my life was a place of abundance and not from scarcity. And it allows me to slow down because I'm not constantly trying to reach this next thing and feeling like I have some timer in the back of my head. There is no timer. The only purpose and beautiful purpose is to enjoy this beautiful life that I've been given with the limited time that I have. And I feel like that's why Iroh now means something completely different to me. I used to see him as the funny, wise uncle, sage character who always had the right thing to say. But now I actually see him as a model for how I actually want to live, like right now, and my mindset that I want to take into every single day, every single interaction. And by the standards of this world, his world, like Iroh lost. He lost his son, position, claim to the throne, and almost everything the Fire Nation knew how to value. So yeah, sure, maybe evil wins. Of course it does. Evil's always trying to win. Goodness was never trying to. Goodness is trying to love, to serve, to protect, to give, and remain fully alive. We have the ability now, in whatever age and stage of life that we are, no matter what we've been through, we do have a choice. And I just hope and pray, may we all experience the joy and freedom that Uncle Iroh has. And choosing that without needing life to pay me back, honestly has not left me with less. It has made my life unbelievably full.